The weatherman was actually right this time about the weather. About us having a very wet and cool summer. And I'm not complaining because I can't hardly stand the really hot heat, and the garden's loving the rain. However, that just means that we have to do chores and garden work in the rain, which can be annoying. The tomatoes have exploded, and we're gonna have to do some heavy pruning on them today. This is something that I should have done a long time ago, but I didn't have anything to stake them up with. I planted the tomatoes before I got the tomato stakes, and in a similar situation, I got the meat birds before the meat chicken tractor was built. But you know, it all got done eventually. I'm gonna try to set you guys up underneath of this umbrella because I don't want my camera to get wet, and we'll see if we can do that. Put you on a time lapse, and I'm gonna prune. I got my, can I hold this like this? I got my little pruners. I'm gonna cut the suckers off and all the bottom leaves, and I might save some of the suckers. I posted on the internet to see if anybody might want the suckers that I'm trimming off today, so that maybe they might propagate them, because some people don't have tomato plants, and that's a really quick way to get tomato plants if you don't have any, is to find somebody who does, who's trimming the suckers off, and you have a whole new plant. If you just stick the sucker in water and it'll grow roots, and you're basically, you are cloning that plant. I'm not going to label what they are or anything. They're just going to get a big handful of random tomato plant cuttings, and instead of throwing them in the compost, that might be a really helpful thing to someone. If anybody wants them. I don't know. We'll see. I've got to do some serious weeding too. I've got some spinach growing underneath these tomato plants, but I'll tell you what, I didn't plant this grass. So I don't want this here. I'm gonna try to get what I can pulled up, prune these plants, and then we can stake them. I want to show you what happens whenever you let your tomato plant fall over onto the ground. It will grow roots anywhere where it's touching the ground and it's wet, especially if you're having a really rainy season, which we are having a rainy season. So I got to figure out where it's coming up out of the ground. I could just bury all of that and let it grow roots and just let it be bushy, because I've let this plant go so crazy that it's determining where the suckers are and where the main stem is, where it fell over, is going to be a little bit complicated. So this is going to be a little tricky, figuring out what to prune, what to not, and how to stake this particular plant up. There are some giant suckers on this plant. Like this was a sucker. And the suckers are growing suckers. So they grow in the crevices of the stems. Here you can see, this is what they look like when they're small, and they're really easy to pick off at that stage. If you can keep on the pruning, then you won't have this issue with them getting this big. Basically what I've done is created a humongous tomato bush that fell over, and then all the suckers started growing up instead of just having the main stem growing up. And it started to turn upwards so much that I'm worried that if I try to straighten it out, the plant will break. So what I'm gonna do, I think, is leave it to where those roots are touching the ground and bury what has fallen over. There's a big piece of the stem that's just laying horizontally on the ground, and I think I'm gonna cut off. I might not cut off all the suckers. I might have like two. There's one big one here. I might just have 2 leaders. So if you leave one sucker on there, you can have like 2 leaders, and that's enough for one tomato plant to handle. If you leave them all on there, your tomato plant will probably have more fruit, but the fruit's going to be smaller, and the plant's going to be more unhealthy because there's not going to be a whole lot of, because everything is going to stay really wet and cause disease and stuff to grow. There's not going to be like a whole lot of ventilation in there. This is a good size sucker to root. All you got to do is put this in water and then you have a whole new tomato plant. So I'm going to save what I can of the suckers and see if anybody wants them. I'm kind of thinking that nobody is going to want them, but you never know. And I will say, where I've planted like different vegetables around it, I'm trying really hard not to not to hurt the spinach while I'm doing this, so it's made it a little bit difficult, but the spinach is doing great. I'm gonna have to go get a shovel so that I can cover this up with some more soil and then stake it, but there's several more suckers to cut off here. When you're cutting suckers, you need to figure out whether the tomato variety that you're growing is determinate or indeterminate. If you're growing a determinate tomato, you don't really want to prune it. If you do that, then you're going to significantly decrease your tomato yield, your fruit yield, because with determinate tomatoes, they only grow to a certain height, they only set on a certain amount of fruit, and if you cut all of the suckers off, then you're not going to have that much fruit. With indeterminate, they just keep they grow wild. They will grow until your first frost, and so you want to keep those under control to prevent disease and to make sure that your plants don't break, and to make healthier, bigger fruit. I got my shovel and I got my tobacco stake. If you're in the South, I'm sure that you know what a tobacco stake is. These things are in barns everywhere, and I was lucky enough to be gifted several bundles of these, usually made of hardwood. Pretty easy to come by if you're in the South. Farmers used to grow tobacco everywhere, and that's what most of the people around here grew as a crop, was tobacco. I have this tobacco stake, and this is what I'm going to be using to stake up all of my tomatoes. I went and got a shovel full of compost, and right here where it started to root in the ground, I'm going to cover it up, straighten it up. I'm going to cover up this entire lower stem here that has started to grow roots. This is just going to make more roots and a stronger, healthier plant, and keep me from breaking it trying to straighten it back up. I think I figured out which sucker I'm going to keep, and I'm going to cut this one off. Now I'm going to go get a hammer in my stake, and tie it up with this baling twine that's come off of a hay bale. You can use pretty much anything to tie up a tomato plant, as long as it's not something too thin, like say like fishing line would definitely cut through your tomato plant. Something else that's good is to reuse an old raggedy t-shirt and rip it up into pieces, cotton t-shirt, and tie it up like that. You can also get tomato twine specifically made for tying up tomatoes. Okay, now that our stake is in the ground, I'm just going to take a piece of this baling twine. Ideally not use your good tomato pruners to cut it with, but that's what I got. And I'm going to tie it around the post. And there are different ways you can do this. There are a bunch of different ways to stake your tomato plants. This just happened to be the most cost-efficient way for me. And then I'm going to very loosely tie it around, because you don't want to do it too tight. I'm going to tie it around the tomato plant here, just to give it some support. Actually, I'm going to make it so in case it tries to fall over again, it's not going to go too far. And as it gets taller, you'll just keep doing the same thing further up the plant. I made that big enough to where the tomato stem has room to grow. It's not going to fall over. Now I've also got this other sucker over here that I left on, and I'm going to do the same thing to it. This particular tomato variety I've never actually grown before, but I do know that it is an indeterminate tomato. This is a Wapsipinicum peach. I know I'm probably saying that wrong, but it is a determinate variety. So it's going to keep growing and keep producing fruit until we get our first frost. So it definitely has to be staked and pruned. Now I was able to get all of the supplies that I'm using for staking these tomatoes for free. I know that's not the case for everybody. You can buy tomato stakes. I couldn't afford it. The price of tomato stakes has went up ridiculously. Like they used to be like $1.50 a piece, and everywhere that I checked this year was no less than $2.75 a stake. So thankfully I was able to score these tobacco stakes for free. Another good way, which I would prefer to do, but I wasn't able to afford it this year too, was cattle panels, because also the price of cattle panels have really gone up. But say you just have one row of tomatoes that you need to tie up, a cattle panel and a couple of T-posts is a really excellent way to do that. They make great supports for your tomatoes. So I got the rest of that row pruned and staked up, and I think the rest of these might be a better example of how to prune and tie them up, or how I do it at least. So I've hard pruned the bottom stalk, and really you just want one leader here. So I've cut off all of the suckers and all of the bottom leaves, anything that might be touching the soil, because that's what causes disease, and then tied it around the plant. And high up on the tomato stake is going to really pull that tomato plant up, and then I'll have to do this in another couple weeks or even a week, depending on how much they grow. And since we are getting so much rain in the next week, I have a feeling that these are really going to take off even more. So I'll show you what the tomato plant looked like before, just a humongous jungle mess, and then what it looks like after a hard pruning and being staked up. And I think I'm going to harvest a turnip for lunch. So let's do that real quick. Oh, wow. That one might be pretty bug eaten. It's not on that side. That thing's giant. It does look... Oh, look, it's been cracked from all the rain. I'm gonna boil it and see what it tastes like. It might be inedible. I don't know, but it's as big as my head. That's what I'm gonna try to have for lunch. And here they are. just one row at a time. But for now I'm gonna go inside and get dried off, and maybe the rain will slow down here in a little while and I'll be able to come back out and work in this nice cool weather and maybe not get so soaking wet. I don't have a good raincoat. Most of mine are not water repellent, or all of mine are not water repellent. I really do need to invest in one of those. Let me know what methods you guys use to support your tomatoes, because I would love to hear it, and where you're from. Is a tobacco stake something that you've heard of? Is it not? Because that would be something really interesting to hear. Hope that this video was helpful. If you enjoyed it, it really helps me if you hit the like button and you subscribe and you share this video with your friends. It's gonna take me several days, especially in this rain, but we're gonna get it done. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.